consider killing an animal a good thing to do?
If it's needed, yes.
Is it needed for you?
Yes.
No.
But you don't know my situation.
You're sitting in Jubilee studio in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
So I feel like you probably have access to a grocery store.
We are at the top of the food chain. This animal will nourish us, therefore we want to nourish this animal.
What sort of a food chain is factory farming, animal agriculture, buying from a supermarket?
I've been on a carnivore diet of eating only animal foods for the past 6 years.
What?
You don't have to support this type of violence and cruelty, but yet people do.
You don't even have to be vegan. Just admit that it's cruelty every time you consume these products. There's a controversial, and I don't know about you guys, but I was extremely annoyed watching the YouTube channel Jubilee recently.
Who is this person?
I think it's just a channel that kind of explores different topics and brings up different debates and stuff. I don't think it's always about veganism, but this one happened to be vegans versus carnivores. And it does seem like it's set in the US because everybody on there was American, right? But yeah, I think they just to kind of show controversial topics, get people to debate against them. And I quite like the format because it's like they have, what was it, vegans on the left, carnivores on the right, and then they say the question. And if you disagree, you step forward, or if you agree, you step forward, and then they come and kind of counteract it. So yeah.
I've been on a carnivore diet of eating only animal foods for the past 6 years. I was also vegan for 6 years, right before I went carnivore. So I feel like I do have a pretty good sense of how I feel, my health, and the purpose of the food that I'm eating with both lifestyles. So when I was vegan, I actually lost my period. So I was no longer fertile. I had extreme skin issues, psoriasis, cystic acne. I had also mental health issues. I used to be a classical pianist, and I studied at Juilliard for 2 years. And I couldn't remember the pieces that I was supposed to perform. And I was panicking. I was like, what is going on with my memory? Why can't I focus in the practice room? And why am I feeling so nervous and anxious right before stepping out? That says a lot about whether or not the foods I'm eating are supporting me. Understand your point of view. I was there myself, but my brain just opened up and I had to face, is it going to be my health? Or is it going to save the animals no matter what?
At some point you have to decide, is it worth sacrificing my health for a religious ideology?
I'm fully healthy. Yeah. I think if you're an anomaly, there can be an exception to be made. But I've been vegan for 13 years, vegetarian for 23 years, and I'm extremely healthy. I get blood work done yearly. I lift weights. I can run a mile in under 7 minutes. You're an anomaly, and I think that there are other anomalies in existence, but I don't see how that goes, how your one experience. I mean, we don't know what you were eating, how you were treating yourself in your day-to-day life.
I had to let go of the vegan hat, the vegan glasses, stop seeing everything through the lens of veganism and prioritize my health because that's truly what it came down to.
Thoughts?
Okay. There is an impact on food in terms of preparation and getting into that state. But what it sounded like to me is that she may not have had a really adequate, comprehensive diet, right? Sometimes when we see people go vegan, they just go fruitarian. And fruitarian may not always be the most robust and comprehensive, nutrient-dense approach to all diets. However, I've met plenty of fruitarians that are pretty healthy. So I think when you are that anomaly that doesn't really approach nutrition in a methodical way, there's going to be some sort of issue, right?
Often these people that come out, they do these ex-vegan videos. The diet that they were on when they were plant-based is like a fruitarian diet, is a raw cleanse for 6 months. I haven't met many vegans that just have healthy, whole food, plant-based stews and enough calories that have these issues. So maybe that's at play.
Yeah, I mean, she does say later on that she was eating whole foods plant-based, but I think in a different part of the interview, she says she didn't eat things like tofu or seitan because she saw those as ultra-processed. It's kind of like, okay, so were you eating any protein then? Were you eating a whole balanced diet? I'm not so sure. Her kind of, what she was saying was, are you just saying I'm doing it wrong then? And it's kind of like, not saying you're doing it wrong, but like, we don't know exactly what you were eating, so...
Well, I would like to say maybe. maybe you are doing it wrong. I mean, I think that's why nutritional science and dietitians and specific food scientists exist in this world, is because we are here to guide people when they may not be doing it as effectively as they could. Right. And if we're finding that they're having these risks and negative effects with a diet, whether that's carnivore or eating more plants, I think that raises concern. And we do need to take a deeper look at how they are eating, what they are eating, when they are eating, and what else they are doing in combination with that.
Remember that we are at the top of the food chain, and being at the top of the food chain, it doesn't mean that we can just go on a rampage and do whatever we want, you know, kill animals and eat them all, but it comes with a responsibility. The strength of being at the top, having the conscious ability to put in the long-term investment to raise animals for food, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of knowledge, and that is something that we humans have the power to do. Yes, we're at the top, but being at the top comes with that responsibility to ethically care for the animals, and like you said, you eat a wild game, you understand the cycle of life of the animals.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's just honoring this beautiful relationship where we nourish and take care of the animals. In turn, nature rewards us by nourishing and taking care of us as well.
It's like that meme where you see people like putting up Buddhist posts and quotes and then still eating meat. And I'm Buddhist. I actually transitioned to Buddhism a few years ago because I chanted with a friend and then met the love of my life 30 minutes later. And I saw the power of chanting, and I'm still with that person almost 5 years later. It changed my life. And at that point, I was already vegan. So I was like, oh, this just goes hand in hand with my ethics and my values and just the spirituality of it. And then I go to a Buddhist meeting, 150 people there, and I'm the only vegan. And I'm trying very hard not to be judgmental, but I'm like, what are you doing? And that whole construct of being like on the top of the food chain, what a man-made ego construct it is. It's not the ecological construct of the synergistic life that lives on planet Earth. So when we put ourselves here, it's because we want to put ourselves here. I'm like, if you really want to be at the top of the food chain, go swim with sharks without weapons and tell me if you cut your leg, if you're still going to be the person on the top of the food chain. You'll be eaten.
100%. I was going to say, like, what sort of a food chain is factory farming, animal agriculture, buying from a supermarket? What, like, wild animal do you know that's just walking into the supermarket? It's not a food chain. It's just us doing what we want, like you said. No. And the other thing that I think was kind of intriguing, she described a beautiful and nourishing relationship between us and the animals. We've all seen the footage. We know what it looks like. They all go to the same slaughterhouse. There's no beautiful and nourishing relationship once that animal's being killed. Like, it doesn't exist. So I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration to kind of like convince yourself you're doing a good thing.
I've got zero patience we could sit here for an hour to unraveling that. I think she mentioned health as well, which we'll talk about throughout this episode. Just not even worth it. Let's just see how this develops.
I think it's incredibly self-centered to say that animals have been put on this earth to feed us. And you say, that we have the power as humans to raise animals for food and to farm them. We also have the power not to do that.
People own pets. They bring pets into their own care, into their own hands. They love them, they house them. They guarantee that these pets are given food, given shelter. It is no different when we are raising animals for food. And it is no different knowing that these animals have a very direct impact on our lives, on our health. We want to love and take care and nourish the animals.
Why don't you just leave them alone then if you want to nourish them, isn't it?
Oh my God. You want to love them. What are you talking about? You want them to die so you can eat them. Make it make sense.
People genuinely believe, and to a certain extent you can't blame people, they think you need animal protein for survival, right? And then they're seeing every justification through that lens. But like, if you take a step back, the leading dietetic associations around the world say we don't need to eat animal products. You don't even have to be vegan. Just admit that it's unnecessary cruelty every time you consume these products.
you see conflicting messages from these very companies. Like if you look at the American Dietetics Association, who's their biggest sponsor for their yearly conference? McDonald's or PepsiCo. What? Also, when I watch this clip, I hear her so vehemently saying, well, you know, we groom these animals because we love them and we want them to be healthy sources of nutrition. But I'm like, does this individual actually do this? Does this person actually rear and raise her own animals and then cut their throats, skin them, depulp them, and then cook them? So I find it very fascinating when people say that they can do something, but yet they don't actually do it. So I need to know if the fact is that she does raise her own chickens or animals for slaughter, but it doesn't seem as that's the case.
I guarantee those two are not slaughtering anything. Also, to clarify, they were both vegan. I've watched the whole thing. They were both vegan before. So like what you said, Klaus, some people don't really know. They think that you need this and that for protein. They know. They 100% know. They've just decided that they can rationalize it in their heads and like justify it. And that their health, well, both of them, they do it from a health perspective. They say that carnivore is the only way they can be healthy. So yeah, we shouldn't give them too much of an easy out.
I always wonder, like, you call yourself a carnivore, but do you eat the intestines raw to ensure that you get all of your water and your nutrients and your vitamins? And that's exactly what a carnivore does.
And old and diseased, right? If you look at true carnivores, they'll go through the weak, old animals with tumors coming out compared to like a young cow or chicken, which is what we choose to consume, which we then have to season before consuming it.
And so, you know, animals out in the wild, they have that chance of being dead, eaten, killed, swept away from harsh conditions. They have that chance of contracting diseases from the outside, and they could be dead today. Within our care, presumably on an ethical farm, I think we can all agree, like I said, factory farming, unethical. But on an ethical farm, we are taking the animals into our own care. We are giving them that guarantee of being fed today. They have that shelter today. We have that bond with them today. And we create this beautiful relationship where we understand that this animal will nourish us, therefore we want to nourish this animal, take care of it the best that we possibly can. But when it comes to eating animals for food, that is a reality that has been with us for the beginning of our existence.
So I think this is a common talking point from ex-vegans, right? Carnivores that have been vegan. They often say, I'm against factory farming. And the plant-based or vegan ethical response to that is, well, any slaughter is wrong because you're taking life away from an animal, which is completely valid. But what really kind of frustrates me as a passionate environmentalist is these ex-vegans never talk about the fact that, okay, they move away from factory farming. It's not a scalable model. So if they're calling out factory farming and saying, okay, we're just having, we just want to support extensive livestock farming. Well, are they simultaneously saying they're going to only eat, a piece of meat a month because any more isn't a scalable option? They never address that issue, right?
No, never. And I'm sure these people are saying they're eating only meat, so they have to eat it every day. They're not eating it once a month, are they? But the thing I really dislike in that clip is she says, well, if the animals were in the wild, they'd get killed anyway. So we're actually doing them a favor. I'm like, what? We're not doing them a favor.
Average lifespan of a cow is how long?
Like 22 years or something like that.
22 to 25 years. And we slaughtered them at the age of what? If they're male, maybe 5 days old. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're extending their lifespan and giving them the best life possible, sweetheart.
Like, oh, we'll treat them so well, and like they get to have a great life because we're so benevolent and we give them this opportunity by breeding them into existence. Like that doesn't make any sense.
What I look at as a good person is somebody that does the right thing in their mind. I mean, the right thing for me and the right thing for you are obviously not the same thing, right?
You do have a choice. You don't have to support this type of violence and cruelty, but yet people do.
Okay.
And I don't consider that good. Do you consider killing an animal a good thing to do?
If it's needed, yes.
Is it needed for you?
Yes.
No.
Absolutely.
I would argue that it's not needed for you because you have choices to make.
But
and
you don't know my
continue to make
situation.
the bad choice.
Well,
Which
you're sitting in the Jubilee studio in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
So I feel like you probably have access to a grocery store.
Yeah, all power to her in that comment.
Yeah. I mean, this man in the clip, he is a hunter. Just context, he is a hunter, and he says that he feeds his whole family from the kills that he makes throughout the year or whatever, which kind of, I'm like, okay, fair. But his argument is, I have to do that. And she literally says, well, you clearly don't because you're in LA or whatever, and you have access to supermarkets and stuff. He said he thinks it's good and right to do it because he has to. And I just don't think that's really true for most of us.
I agree. People use what people like him are saying as a halo effect to justify all forms of animal product consumption. So they'll use what he says and then go down and get literally like the processed factory farm meat. And they use it in a disingenuous way to justify their own behavior.
Because you choose it, just like you choose everything else in your life. What you like is your choice. It's always your choice before it's something that you like. And so I think that's the construct of behavior change or behavior choice we have to acknowledge and really get into the forefront of anytime we have a conversation with anyone who is trying to actually change their behavior, to see that it's not about liking, it's not about wanting, it's not about doing, it's about what we choose.
And just to add, like, obviously everybody in that studio is sitting with like a level of privilege whereby they can actually make the choice, which I think is the point that the vegan was trying to make. If you are somewhere where you have no access, like a food desert, or you're literally on, a remote island or some culture where only things you can have are fish, I'm not saying to you, you all must be vegan. That's not what we mean. But it's like when it's us and we have privilege, and like the majority of the people in this argument literally have the privilege to say, okay, I could choose to be vegan, I just don't.
I personally believe a vegan diet, if you actually want to thrive and be healthy on this lifestyle, it's not cheap. It is not the most affordable diet at all, and I will tell you, being a carnivore, eating only meat, eating only animal foods, my grocery bill is less than when I was shopping for vegan.
And a plant-based diet is vastly cheaper than one that relies on animal flesh and secretions. Pasta, beans, potatoes, bread. All of these items are usually very affordable and staples in most of our diets, I would assume. The real privilege that comes into play with this prompt is the fact that some people think they are privileged enough to take another's life when they have other options available.
Clearly it was considered a privilege. You know, you had to be king and queens to eat that. The peasants were supposed to eat like, just bread and things of that nature.
And the cheapest groceries throughout history have been rice and beans, which are both full of nutrients, and also soy, which you call a filler food, even though it's a complete protein.
I mean, it's an objective fact, right? Plant-based food is cheaper and more affordable, which is why many cultures around the world consume that pattern of eating. I think there's a study from the University of Oxford in 2021 showing that when you base a plant-based lifestyle off natural foods, it's 30% cheaper.
In our work with Greener by Default, what we actually did is we worked with New York City's health and hospitals to start transitioning their patient meals to be more plant-forward. And so in this study, what we actually did is we gave the patients two options of really delicious plant-forward food. And if they didn't like those two options, then they were given a static menu to choose from that had some meat and dairy options. But what we found is that over 95% of the patients went with a plant-based meal and they were incredibly satisfied with it. It was so successful that New York City Health and Hospitals expanded that program to making plant-forward foods from one hospital to all 11, which then saved 59 cents per meal, which, by the way, translated to over $500,000 saved annually. So you want to talk about making impacts. They reduced their carbon footprint by over 30%, saved over $500,000. We actually got some research from an academic institution that has a fully plant-based dining hall, and they also reported that their cost savings per plate had been reduced by about a third. So the evidence is there. Plants are cheaper. Meat's expensive.
For sure. I think when people are saying that veganism is more expensive, what they mean is actually the processed vegan foods, like the new products coming out, like maybe a vegan chicken or sausages or those kind of things, because they can have a higher price point. Like, I agree with that. But like most vegans aren't eating those things all the time. Like most of us are just eating the whole foods, lentils, rice, beans, all those kind of things, which come in way cheaper.
There's a study recently I saw from World Bank. It's 2023 report about subsidies, right? Each minute, $26 million globally goes to subsidizing, according to the World bank the three most damaging industries: fossil fuels, livestock farming, and industrial fishing. So the fact that, meat alternatives are in many cases providing that price parity in spite of the disproportionate meat and dairy subsidies just shows that this pattern of eating is inherently cheaper.
So true. And what will the world be like once the subsidies actually switch to plant foods and plant agriculture? We can only hope.
These industries will go bust, right? They won't be able to survive.
I think so.
Trump, not to make this political, it's not political, but like Trump always goes on about free market capitalism. Take away the subsidies, you get rid of the fossil fuels, you get rid of the animal agriculture, the world will be vegan. They don't realize that is voting for a system that is basically vegan.
So true.
I think these vegans did such an amazing job, especially my dear friend Tor Washington on this video. I love him to death. And I just see how poised and calm that they remain in conversations that just normalize injustice and oppression. I still get so angry at this vapid, egotistical, self-righteous response, which oftentimes I don't get to say in my professional world or in my personal endeavors with people because it really doesn't get me anywhere.
It's the safe space for that here. We can get, as we've seen, as annoyed as we want. But I also like talking with you both because I feel like we've got good perspective. We're not your typical preachy vegans, right? But equally, it does annoy the hell out of me watching these clips in the ignorance.
Both sides spoke really well. They did. They were eloquent. Like, we can't say that they weren't. And they had their own points, which they obviously really care about. But it just kept coming back down to, like you said, the kind of egotistical argument and the ethics and the sustainability and the cruelty and all that stuff, for me personally, just can't really be put to the side and just be like, yeah, but we look after them. We love them. It's cool. Disagree.